Hello everybody, nice to talk to you again. We are back for another building tutorial video, except for this time, again, just like with the lampposts, we're going to go into more detail, and that is why I'm speaking on this one. So, texturing. Texturing is my favorite thing to do with builds. It adds so many more possibilities to what you can do. Flooring can be textured, walls can be textured, especially if you have plain designs like these and like that. This may seem like a simple design, but you can still add more texturing to it to make it even better. All right. Well, first of all, let's talk about how you texture, because it can be random. It is supposed to be random, and yet there are patterns to it. So let's just start with cobblestone to start with. Let me just go ahead and do this. So that right there, this is one pattern. This is one pattern. Having just those two, like that, that is one pattern. Let me grab some stone here so I can fill this back in. There are also, there's also this one. There's a bunch of different ones. Like maybe you just do, hold on 1 second. Maybe you just do like that. You can already see that the texturing on this is getting random, because when you use all of these in sequence close together, it creates that texturing sort of look. So let us go ahead and just try a bunch of these. Let me just fill these in. Let's try a bunch of these, and we will see how it turns out. So if I do this, that, see, I've used two of the same design, but it's in different rotations, so it looks different. And I add that, and then maybe some of this. Maybe I put one there to add more texturing. Maybe it's just 2 blocks in a straight line. And then that. And then maybe we do like that. So then when we fill this in, just a second. When we fill this in, it looks like more of a random texture. And of course you can alter this and play with it to make it look a little better. Like obviously I think that this could do with a few more, but I think this looks pretty good. However, you don't just want to texture with one block. You can also texture with other blocks, like mossy cobblestone. So let's say we add this to this build, just kind of randomly. Although this still looks like there is some synonymousness to it. Hold on. Okay, so that adds another layer, right? It adds more texture, it adds another block element, and so it starts looking a little bit more cohesive as far as texturing goes. But you can go even further. Let's say I want to add some of this andesite here. It's more of a stone texture, so you don't want to replace too many of the cobblestones, but you do want to replace some. Now when you add that, look at that. Look at how good that looks. This is my favorite texturing technique for stone. When you have just a blank stone surface, having this is perfect. It's perfect. I love it. Now, we will go ahead and move on to some of these other floorings in just a second. I will pull out materials and we can get working on it. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are back with some new materials. We will be continuing with Tuff. Tuff is something that I haven't really worked with too much, but it's something that I will probably be working with in future builds. And it already has all the components you need to add that element of texturing. So if we could just quickly add some of these. This will add some depth to our flooring. So, oh, and this looks a little too normal here. Something like that. Okay. So we've added an element of texture to this flooring. Now, when you start with some sort of bricks and you're adding texture with the normal block, like with stone, it would be cobblestone. With these tough bricks, it would be the regular Tuff. It makes it look like the stones are aging away, that they're degrading. And so it adds age to the flooring. So if you're going for something that is more broken down or supposed to be like an older or bigger, larger building, then having this older flooring texture is a great element to have for those types of builds. However, again, we can add another block in here. Kind of add some element of difference. And now it looks like there were small stone pieces that were cut, but also large stone pieces that were cut to be part of the pathway. And then they just kind of filled everything else in. So now it looks more kind of like a gravel pathway that was intended to be a stone pathway. And yet the builders probably got lazy. But I think that this is a good option here for texturing. Now, let's say you are doing something simpler, like this. You have, I believe, actually, let me take a look what the block name was. You have the chisel tough bricks on the outer edges, and then you have the polished tough in the center. Having these edges as an outline to pathways, I like it mostly for underground builds, especially if you have really long hallways. Having some sort of outline is really nice. Also, if you are building a straight pathway, like let's say you're doing some sort of stone bridge, maybe you build a tough bridge. In that case, having those outlines would also add an extra amount of detail. And of course you could have like ledges that go along here as you go along the bridge. But again, adding some of these textures in here will make this look a little worn down. And honestly, I really like that. I really do like this. I might actually end up using this in another build at a later point. So this is why I love texturing. Texturing is really fun. However, it does add a lot more work. I will be honest in that it does add a lot more work. For example, this wall section here. This is something that I designed for a city I made in another world. That city, the walls alone, took me 1.5, 2 weeks to build the walls. I had to do both sides because this is only one side of the wall. The texturing portion took another 2 weeks. So depending on how you scale your builds, sometimes texturing can be difficult to add as an element. However, if you have a smaller build, usually it's not that big of a deal to add texturing. Alrighty, now let's get to spruce flooring. My favorite block, my favorite series of blocks is spruce. I love to work with spruce, and I think I've worked with it for the longest compared to all the other materials. But despite how having a simple spruce floor would be nice, sometimes you would want to add texturing to it, again, to add that extra element. Sometimes it's for, like, let's say the inside of your house looks very flat, right? If you want everything to not look super blocky, I guess, of course you can add elements on the inside to help with that, but also you can add texturing to make the flooring look aged, or to maybe look like it was intentional. Now, you see how I'm not adding as many of these spruce logs to this? That is intentional. You want it to mostly be the plank texture in this case. But if you like, I'm starting to add too many. Now it's starting to look a little bit too much like a pattern. So I want to remove some of these actually. And maybe removing that would be good. And then let's go ahead and get rid of these guys. Fill in the spots that I broke open. So that starts looking good. But you can also use spruce trap doors. Now, of course, it's not a full block. So there's, let's say you're on a server, somebody could put a puffer fish with water below it, and you wouldn't notice, and you'd accidentally get poisoned. That's a prank idea. But for building, adding this makes it look a little nicer. And I guess the other positive thing that would come with this is that you could have a hidden trapdoor somewhere in your house. So let me actually go ahead and do this. Also, you can change the orientation to add more texture and add more variety. Quick. Okay. So that adds a little bit more texture to it. It looks like the flooring is kind of nailed down in certain spots. But also, you can open these and then build down, have a ladder going down into like a basement or like a secret area, and kind of use it as like a secret room or a secret like hiding spot for a room. Now, sometimes that is obvious. Somebody will like run into your build and like open these up to try to see if there is something. But sometimes, depending on where you place it, they'll open up a bunch of them and then just give up. And then you still have that secret spot. Now let's move on to birchwood. Now birchwood, I don't believe there are too many other blocks. Let me just go ahead and take a look here. I guess, yeah, no, there aren't too many other blocks to work with. Birchwood is a little bit more difficult. I would still stick to the randomness. Again, you can add sideways, or let me go ahead and do this. You can add sideways textures to add another element to this. But let me just go ahead and randomly break open some blocks here. And do that, and do this, and this. Alright, there we go. Again, you can just add some of these logs in order to add that extra texture to the planks that you place down for your flooring. Alright. Now we're moving on to diorite. Now, diorite, I usually don't like working with. However, there are applicable cases when it comes to putting them in walls, especially if you add details around them. Usually alone, I don't like to have it unless there is a whole theme about a room that matches with diorite. However, you can add other blocks to make it look quite a bit better. So if I add maybe more conservatively some of these blocks here, some of these polished diorite blocks, you start adding some texture. There's that depth because of the edging around the polished diorite. However, you can still add more to make it look better. Now, my favorite to work with to add to diorite is calcite. And calcite's a little bit more difficult to get, but in the end, I think it's worth it. All right, so again, more texture. It kind of feels similar to this, doesn't it? Well, it's basically along a similar line as far as texturing. Except for with this, we went the opposite direction. We started with like a stone brick or a more complicated block, and we worked our way backwards. So you can still work your way backwards and still get a similar result as far as depth, as far as texturing goes. There are actually quite a bit of white blocks to work with, which makes the variability of texturing diorite a lot easier. Like white wool, you can add wool to add more texture. It's a little bright, but it works. And you don't want to detract too much of the diorite, because then you start losing what the diorite is, right? You originally start with diorite and then add all these other elements, and you want to keep the element that you started with. However, let me just go ahead and start adding this mushroom stem block. The mushroom stem block will be more difficult to come by, for sure. But again, more conservatively, you don't want to replace too many of the diorite blocks, because again, otherwise you lose that element. Let me do this block, okay. And now look at how complicated the texture becomes. Now this is really nice. I do really like this. This would be good for a bigger area. However, this adds too much complexity. So with texturing, you can add too much complexity to your blocks, which then ends up detracting from your build. So I would recommend choosing diorite, or let's say you're working with granite, and I would choose 2 to 3 other blocks maximum to add as elements to your texturing. Now, we did texture this spruce plank flooring. However, you can go more simple, like this. The nice thing about the stripped logs, let me go ahead and actually pull out this guy too. The really nice thing about or stripped logs is that the texturing, when you put it in a checkered pattern, makes it look like wood tiling. And especially with all the texture on the block itself, you don't really need to add anything extra. So checkering or making your stripped logs into a checkered pattern inside of your house, inside of smaller areas, generally probably maximum 50 by 20 as far as dimensions go. It can add a really nice texturing element without you having to actually physically texture. So sometimes you don't even need to texture. And that's the really nice thing about this. Now, I've done this sort of flooring in a lot of the other builds over there because I just really have been enjoying it. And especially, let me just go ahead and build this out, especially the dark oak. The dark oak, I don't know if you can tell, but it looks like some of the tiles are kind of shifted over into others. And so it looks like they're kind of overlapping. And that's what makes it look a little nicer than, let's say, the spruce. So in this one, it looks more cohesive. Yes, there's a little tiny tinge of overlap, but it's not as pronounced as it is in this. And since it's so pronounced, it has a completely different floor texture compared to the spruce. And so I tend to lean towards doing a dark oak combined with spruce, some sort of spruce element with the walls or with the pillars, and then maybe another stone, like a stone brick or maybe a tough brick. And that usually ends up being a good combination or a good color combination for builds. Alrighty, well, these are the floorings that we just worked with. In a future video, we will work with wall textures, and then after that, we will work with path texturing. So we're going to slowly upgrade the complexity or the variety of the way that we texture to kind of give you an idea of other methods you can use that you have at your disposal. But thank you guys for coming in for this video. I hope that you learned a thing or two about texturing and about complexity when it comes to texturing, and about sometimes in certain contexts you don't end up needing texturing at all, and you can still add an element of depth to your flooring. Alrighty guys, have a great day.